lead it lead in the water issue is going to be, you know, done away with. Basically, if the government doesn't step forward economically to fix this, and the branch of the government that would address this would be the Environmental Protection Agency, where would we be?
Well, that's another great observation, Earl, that the reason why we birthed the US EPA was a recognition that clean water and clean air is life. And that if we don't rectify the problems that we have, people aren't going to be able to breathe well, and they're going to get cancers and other chronic and acute diseases from the and that's why the EPA was put up. Now the EPA hasn't been perfect. There's been problems under both Republican and Democratic administrations, but this Trump administration and his nominee for the US EPA, who has to head it, has no experience dealing with these issues. And his approach is, how do we end the regulations? And the approach of the Trump administration is, how do we cut government jobs, and how do we save trillions of dollars by not providing the things that are at the center of government, like clean air and clean water. So
You
this would be
know,
a tragedy if it were to come to pass.
and I guess, Paul, more than anything else, there has to be whistleblowers, right? Somebody has to sound the alarm, because if we don't talk about it, if we don't bring it to light, then people are just going to be the same sheep that we've been all of this time, and just trusting that people are going to do the right things, that corporations are going to do the right things. Um, it- you know, it's not the total government that is bereaved of caring about the people. There's segments of it, and when you have people who have done the kind of things that have been done, uh, to the American people, we wind up where we are. I see our good friend Robert Miranda has just joined us. Good morning to you, Robert. How you doing, sir?
Hey, good morning, Earl. Good morning, Paul. Sorry for the
Oh
technical
man,
difficulties.
that's no problem, man. It's good to have you on board. So, Paul and I were talking about the fact that the selection by President Trump for the head of the EPA, a person that's like most of the people that he selected for cabinet positions, has no experience, doesn't know anything about it, and yet the first thing he's talking about is kind of doing away with the EPA. Your thoughts?
Well, it just shows that these people don't care about the health of the American people. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about nothing more than just making pure profit. And they're pirates. They're privateers that have no conscience of of this of the needs of the people of this country. We have been invaded. Our government has been invaded by pure profiteers who are nothing more than just opportunists taking advantage of the people's wants and needs, and desire for change to improve their lives. And by Trump appointing a bunch of individuals who have just the most despicable credentials to all of these positions in government, shows that Trump is doing a much better job at destroying America than Putin, Xi from China, or little Kim over there in North Korea could ever do.
You,
This is a horrendous situation with EPA, to appoint an individual who clearly lacks the scientific knowledge, the respect for science. He's probably an anti climate change person, who just only sees the land, our country is nothing more than a dollar bill, and that's it. And it's just tremendously obvious that this administration could care less about the American people's health in this country.
So, Robert and Paul, with that backdrop, what we can expect in an incoming administration, protecting yourself is the key element. And so
Right.
what we're going to spend time talking about this morning is not to rely on the EPA, not to rely on the government, but you've got to protect yourself and your family. And we're going to talk about the methods, the scientific methods that we know that are there and that work for you to protect your own families. Mr. Paul Schwartz, co-founder of the Campaign for Lead-Free Water. Robert Miranda, executive director of FLAC, Fresh Water for Life, and you on the Earl Ingram Show.
Someday at Christmas, men won't be boys, playing with bombs like kids play with toys. One warm December, our hearts will see a world where men are free. Someday at Christmas, there'll be no wars, when we have learned what Christmas is for. When we have found what life's really worth, there'll be peace on earth.
All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. I'm joined once again, as I am every Wednesday, as we're every Wednesday, with co-founder of Campaign for Lead-Free Water, Mr. Paul Schwartz, and Robert Miranda of FLAC, Fresh Water for Life. So guys, is it safe to say, we just play a little holiday music? The holiday is upon us. and people are wondering what kind of gifts should I get my family members. You couldn't find a better gift, guys, for your grandchildren and your daughters and sons who may not be aware of the follies that that they deal with on a daily basis with their faucets. You want to talk a little bit, Robert, Paul, about you know some of the solutions that we know uh, people can use to avoid this issue we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely, Earl. First, I want to say that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and information and just action is part of the solution. And I want to focus in a little bit on a situation that's happening in my city today. A water main broke in Northeast Washington, D.C., and created a condition of low pressure, which sometimes can put uh, microbial, meaning like pathogens and viruses and other stuff, things like E. coli, in the water supply. And so, for an abundance of caution, our water authority, DC Water, issued yesterday a boil water alert. And that's the right thing to do to inactivate or kill those bugs. But what they didn't tell people, and this is critical and necessary, and water authorities and EPA don't require this language, is that boiling not only does not remove lead from water, which, that's an EPA recommendation not to boil your water, but when you have a boil water alert, uh, it tends to concentrate. If you don't filter before you boil, it tends to concentrate the lead. According to a peer-reviewed scientific paper on lead poisoning from 1992, in infancy, excessive boiling, quote, increases the lead concentration of tap water, amplifying the risk of lead intoxication and exposing the infants to substantial quantities of lead with every formula feeding. And that's from Shannon and Grafe in 1992. And yet this information is missing from most recommendations for preventing exposures to lead in water, as well as many and perhaps even most boil water advisories like the one that went out on our media yesterday, that water utilities must issue to protect consumers from waterborne pathogens. It's therefore imperative that water authorities all around the country, when these low pressure situations happen, and especially during the winter when pipes break, that they make the messaging clear when it comes to lead from plumbing. Boiling one's water can be dangerous because it can expose consumers to unusually high levels of lead, causing potentially significant health harm. And in terms of that Christmas gift or holiday gift for those who are not Christian brothers and sisters, I think getting what's called a dually certified lead filter that's a countertop or put right on the faucet mounted. So you want ANSI, NSF, ANSI, NSF certification 42 and 53. And for the certification 53, you want a statement saying that it's going to reduce lead. Find that on the box at the hardware store. Then you've made a great gift, and you're going to end lead exposure, whether it's during a water alert or any other day of the year.
Robert?
Yeah, that's interesting that Paul bring that up about what's going on there today in Washington, D.C. I think as you may recall, Earl, when you attended one of our committee meetings at the Public Health and Safety Committee in Milwaukee City Hall, we raised that issue back in 2016 when we presented some of our science and some of our maps to the committee in regards to how lead pipes are affecting the health of the city of Milwaukee. And one of the areas that we pointed out was that back in 1992, 93, around there, if you recall, cryptosporidium hit. And cryptosporidium was a real damaging blow to the city of Milwaukee. We lost about 100 souls
Right.
during that. A lot of people were getting sick. And the city of Milwaukee did issue at that time also a boiling water alert. They did not say anything about the lead in the water at that time either. The reason why this is important to mention is because we know through science, there are numerous science studies and reports about how lead affects our children's minds and causes disruption in their behavior and disruption in their education, but it also leads to crime. And in Milwaukee, after the cryptosporidium episode, the the record shows that 25 years later, we experienced a spike in crime in the city of Milwaukee. And so it is important that people get filters this year, get filters for their houses, even if you have lead pipes or not.
All right, 855-752-4842. Co-founder of Campaign for Lead-Free Water, Paul Swartz, and Robert Miranda of FLAC. You can join us at 855-752-4842 on the Earl Ingram Show.
Hear what I hear. Say the little lamb to the shepherd boy. Do you hear what I hear? What I hear. Moving through the night, shepherd boy. Do you hear what I hear? What I hear. A song high above the tree, with a voice as big as the sea. With a voice as big as the sea.
All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. Again, Mr. Paul Schwartz, who is the co-founder of Campaign for Lead-Free Water, and Robert Miranda Flack. So, gentlemen, I would say while we are, working hard and diligently to get this information out to people, not only in this audience, but across the nation, we're going to be, just want to say to people that we're going to be expanding what we are doing with this in the coming months in doing a podcast that will certainly expose this to even more people. I'm really excited about the prospects about what of the magnitude of the outreach that we are going to have in bringing this information to people. But let me say to you guys, what if you don't have the money for filters? There are a lot of people who struggle in this society and they don't have extra financial resources. I don't know, is the government providing these filters? Is there a way? And the question is, why not? If the government is aware that this is going on, why can't the government supply these filters, until Robert, until people can, get the lead pipes removed?
Well, the interesting point is, Earl, that the government can supply these filters. I don't know if you recall, but when we first started exposing
Yeah, I do
this
recall
matter,
it. I do recall. In Milwaukee, they did it.
yes, Milwaukee city government and its bureaucracy freaked out, and all of a sudden, the city was handing out filters throughout the city.
Right.
The city Milwaukee Health Department was telling people to go to the various different city buildings and city park field houses and to pick up, and people were lining up for those filters.
That's true.
So the issue is that the pressure of the people needs to happen for city government, for municipalities to make things like that happen. And we proved that back in 2015, 2016, when we started having those rallies at City Hall and started having those teach-ins at the rotunda of City Hall. I don't know if you recall.
I was there.
Yeah, and so that kind of pressure from the people is needed to force government to do the right thing, because government doesn't have plans to use our tax dollars to protect us. Government has plans with our tax dollars to support venture capitalists and their plans for developing Camelot. When I mean Camelot, I mean downtown Milwaukee. And so they don't see those dollars as dollars that should be used to stabilize communities, to protect public health, to improve public services. They see those dollars that need to go to these poor billionaires who want to develop sports arenas, or who want to build beautiful venues so that people can come to their plazas and spend their money. That's the way they see our dollars. Our community showed that when you apply pressure, then the right pressure backed by facts, not conspiracy, facts, the government will respond in the right way. And so, without that kind of people power, the government will not do what is right. And the city of Milwaukee and other cities around the country should be supplying filters to those who can't afford it.
So Paul, how expensive are these filters, and what's their life expectancy?
That's also a great question. I want to answer that, but before I do, I want to say echo what Robert Miranda just said, which is that this is a political fight. It's also a fight to get out the right information, and it's also a fight, a policy fight over what our priorities are and how to get the right type of filters out to people and let people train people on how to install them properly, how to maintain them properly, and how to operate them properly. Otherwise, it could be a problem. But typically, at a big box store, a countertop filter or a faucet-mounted filter would be around $50 to $100, and the replacement activated carbon discs that go with that, if you go to a big box store, would be like $7 for $50. So for people who have any money, it's affordable. But for people who don't, we need help. We need subsidies and help. In a bill recommendation to a bill that's going before the DC City Council, we're asking for three things in relation to filters. One is that the water authorities and the DC government and EPA should let people know that lead in water is near in every building and that they should filter. That doesn't really cost any money, just to let people know and give them the option to protect themselves. Second, to subsidize especially the Women, Infant, Children program and the SNAP program recipients, who are the most vulnerable people with filters. And third, to make sure that as we're swapping out the lead laterals or lead service lines, that we go far beyond what the water authorities are going to be required to do to give people 6 months of filters after those lead pipes are swapped out, and do it today for people who have that, and know that even if they don't have a lead service line, that when they're going in and digging out the lead laterals, that everybody's house is shaking and lead is coming out of their pipes and being dispensed through their taps.
So if you're just joining us, once again, we're joined by Robert Miranda of Fresh Water for Life and Paul Swartz, co-founder of a campaign for lead-free water. And this is an ongoing segment of the Earl Ingram Show every Wednesday as we talk about the inherent dangers in these things. So Paul, let me ask you, if I know in the attack or the fight that Robert and others were putting up in the city of Milwaukee, do you start at the city level, or is it the state level, or is it both?
Well, in fact, it's our local governments, it's our state government, and it's our federal government. We need all three to work together in concert to make sure that the policies are right and that the implementation of those policies are sound, and that people have the information and the tools necessary to protect themselves at the individual level with our families and at the community level. Because some of this goes back to the type of messaging that Robert was talking about around the cryptosporidium outbreak in Milwaukee in the spring of '93, when the information wasn't getting out to people. And so the reason why the information wasn't getting out to people is because the water authority and the health departments are either relying on or hiding behind what is often incorrect information that's coming out from the national health authorities like the Centers for Disease Control and US EPA.
Guys, and Robert, this is, here we are, and with the tobacco issue. How long have we been fighting the tobacco issue? Um, there's now, this fight about menthol uh, cigarettes and the damage that it causes, and the government is aware of it, and yet they know that, especially people of color who have a proclivity to smoke menthol cigarettes, are dying overwhelmingly. And yet, knowing that that's happening, it should be an easy fix for our elected officials to say, "Hey, this is killing people. Let's correct it." Well, here we are with something similar. We know what's happening with this lead in the water. And so we can't solely rely on our elected officials to do the right thing. And why not, Robert?
I mean, why not is because the people have been so accustomed to all this misinformation, misleading statements, manufactured facts by government, and so people are just trusting of what the government is saying about what's going on with their water, and so people just don't really understand and know where to really get the facts on these things, and so there people say, well, there are groups out there that are supposed to be watching out for that. Well, yeah, there are some groups out there, but by and large, most of these groups are out there in government's payroll. Everybody is relying on grants, and everybody who gets a grant or does get money from some source is not going to bite the hand that feeds them. And so when you got groups out there dealing with this specific issue of money, of water, for example, they're not going to be raising these kinds of issues we're raising here. They're not going to be talking about the kind of things we talked about when we started this movement back in 2015. They're not going to raise these kinds of things because they know that government has a tendency to start blocking them from getting that money and that gravy they've been getting for the longest. And so people who have a commitment to the community, people who have a commitment to public stability, public life, public health, those are the kind of leaders that need to step up. The kind of leaders that we saw back in the 50s and 60s who had the courage to come forward and say enough is enough and it's time to change things then. Those are the kind of leaders we need back today. We've got too many people too interested in the bling and the money and getting rich and being like Elon Musk and doing things like that'll only get their wallets fat. We need more people who have a commitment to seeing that their community is going to survive and is going to thrive on dignity, on integrity, on decency, on stability. These are the kind of leaders that we need to start seeing more of. And I'm not impressed by somebody who rolls up in a beautiful Rolls or BMW. What I'm impressed by is the individual who takes that bus to the meeting and starts fighting for the people.
So, Paul, I want to pose this question, and that's, do you think that maybe because of the fact that this is not something that we see immediately with lead and the impact that it has on human beings, you don't see it if you drink water today, that the impact of the drinking that lead is going to impact you tomorrow? It's a long, drawn-out process. Do you think that maybe that's one of the reasons why people don't get so worked up about this? We'll talk about it. 855-752-4842 on the Earl Ingram Show.
happy if you would bring him love on Christmas Day. No greater gift is better than love.
All right, welcome back to the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show, being this first hour. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. Once again, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Swartz, co-founder of Campaign for Lead-Free Water, and Robert Miranda, executive director of FLAC. So, Paul, I was asking you before the break, this is not something that, you drink some water that has lead in it and, right away you keel over dead. It's something that over time, do you think the fact that it happens over time and so people aren't really alarmed because they don't see the ravages of it right away? You think that's part of the reason why it's hard to get people worked up over it?
Thank you for that question, Earl. It's a really good point. As the song went that you played earlier, do you see what I see?
Yes.
And lead and water, you can't see or taste lead. It's invisible. And the infrastructure, the pipes coming into buildings, the lead laterals and the plumbing inside buildings are sort of out of sight, out of mind. And you'd figure that if there was some problem, somebody would tell you that there was that problem.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's not happening. So this program, Piercing the Veil, getting through what Robert was talking about of the manufactured ignorance is really important. There's a trade association called the Lead Industry Association. It's now just recently defunct, but they sent out agents around the country to require building codes to use lead and water. To use lead in plumbing. And one of the biggest proponents of that was the big association of all the water utilities like Milwaukee Water Works, or out in Flint or Newark, or DC Water in my hometown. And the American Water Works Association has been working for over 100 years to get people to prefer using lead, to train plumbers and pipe fitters to use lead. And because of that, in the EPA area that Milwaukee and Chicago and Detroit are in, it's called Region 5, the head enforcer, who sort of really listened to the citizens in Flint when they said something's wrong with our water, Miguel Del Toro, resigned from the American Water Works Association, which he had been a long and proud member of, because he said that association wasn't telling the truth and was putting their thumb on the scale of federal regulations, something called the lead and copper rule, so that they could provide fig leaves for the water authorities not to be accountable for what was going on. And this collusion between the United States EPA, their Office of Water, and the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, where these rules are made, and the water authorities and their associations have left people in the dark. And so while lead exposure in the womb, in utero, or amongst little kids between 0 and 6, the damage can happen with one slug of lead, and it could be a lifetime damage, just even before you're born. Lead in water is a teratogen, and what that word means is that it's one of those contaminants that get passed from the mom through the placenta to the developing baby. And so it's not surprising that when people wake up to this, they figure out, oh, that attention deficit disorder, that spontaneous abortion or fetal death, that problem that I'm having with getting my kid to be mature because his or her frontal lobe is not developing, could be associated or related with this unseen danger of lead and water.
Robert, safe to say, follow the money, right?
the money. And that's a great question you posed, because I like to use the example of what happened at that Marine Corps base at Camp Lejeune. The people were drinking, the Marines, their families were
Right.
drinking that water, even though that water was toxic. And again, it is a time issue. Over time, your body becomes sick. You become sicker. And now they found out that after about 40 years of drinking that toxic water, all these Marines and their families are developing cancer. That's the same thing going on with lead. We're not developing cancer, but we're developing other health problems that are harming our families.
Hey, Robert and Paul, thank you very much, as always, for what I think is going to be life-changing information. We're going to continue down this road. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys again next Wednesday. Up next, Dr. Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, and you on the Earl Ingram Show.
If you know somebody, if you know somebody who needs love, yeah. Why don't you give love, give love, give love, give love, give love.
It's time to get organized with Dr. Craig and Citizen Action. Working for democracy and taking on economic, racial, and environmental issues across Wisconsin and around the United States. Here's Earl Ingram with Dr. Robert Craig.
Good morning and welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. Good morning to you, Dr. Craig. How you doing? How was the holiday?
Good. It was good, though. I had to hit the road right away. I'm talking to you from Atlanta.
All right. Well, a little warmer there?
A little bit, but it's still 40s. It's not exactly like tropical, but it's nice compared to, I understand it's getting really cold in Wisconsin today.
I got a lot to talk about with you today. Let's have at it. So let's begin here, Dr. Craig. Monday, I had Ben Wickler on, and he's running for the DNC chair. And listening to him, he said what I wanted to hear. Hey, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. This was a close election. And so Democrats shouldn't totally change everything that they've been doing and talking about and be more like Republicans, because that's what's required today, because so many Democrats went to the right because of policies of Democrats who somehow have forgotten about the average American. And I don't know, Dr. Craig, what are your thoughts? Should the Democrats totally revamp everything that they stand for because of this election?
Well, no, of course not. Ben is right that it was a relatively close election. It was not a blowout by any modern standard or standard of actually the history of American presidential elections. There was a few point shift towards Republicans, only 1.5% in Wisconsin, the narrowest margin. And given the economy, in particular, the financial squeeze families are feeling, this actually is probably, let me put it this way, probably Democrats did very well given the public perception of their economic situations and the reality of the squeeze of the price, not just of groceries or gas. Gas actually is moderated a lot, but healthcare, childcare, all the other necessities of life, right? Housing, right? Because there's a real housing bubble going on and unaffordability of housing. So given that, it probably had probably the Republicans could have expected to perform even better than they did. It's a little bit of a shock. They won the popular vote nationally. We'd kind of gotten used to the idea that Republicans could only steal it, but the fact that Republicans can win it fair and square calls into even further question 2020 and their various voter suppression efforts everywhere, which assume they can't win a popular vote. But what you have going on here, I'm glad to hear Ben said that, Earl. He wasn't asked that question on Morning Joe, surprisingly, not surprisingly. Don't be too sarcastic, not surprisingly. And there are a lot of, since the Democratic Party is a less unified party, it's a big pro-democracy tent, right? I would say the more corporatist conservative elements of the party are trying to take advantage of the situation and say, oh, that means we can't be too liberal. But that falls in the face of the fact that the only side of the party that has answers for the struggles of working people and middle-class people, the great decline in economic equality that's occurred in the last 40 years, and the continuing horrendous levels of race-based economic inequality, is the progressive wing of the party. I mean, if you're going to make healthcare affordable, you need to intervene in the healthcare marketplace and take decision-making away from big insurance companies, big pharmaceutical companies, and big hospital monopolies. If you want to make childcare affordable and have universal pre-K, which would do a ton for working families, you need progressive solutions. If you want paid family medical leave, if you want the child tax credit and enhanced earned income tax credit, which will dramatically increase wages for working families and for working single people, then you need progressive solutions. So you hear them saying it both ways, Earl, on the same, like Morning Joe and other kind of places, claiming that we need to listen to the pain of working class people, but then saying the solution, therefore, is more of what got us in trouble, like free trade deals that are dominated by big corporations and gut our good family supporting union jobs.
Dr. Craig, Chuck Schumer just got reelected as the Senate Democratic leader. Is it time that the Democrats move on from the Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, dare I say it, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren? Is it time that the younger generation of Democrats come to the surface and begin to lead?
You see, there's a lot of ageism baked into all of this. Look, we should not have a leadership overall that's mostly octogenarians, right? Because that's unrepresentative. You need a mix, right? Obviously, the Democratic minority leader in the House is a much younger man, right? Hakeem Jeffries. Yeah, someone like a Nancy Pelosi, who I got to talk with at length one day, thanks to Gwen Moore, bringing her to Milwaukee, and we doing health events with her. She was a brilliant leader. You don't necessarily want to, she's not the leader anymore, but you don't necessarily not want her wisdom and expertise, but you also need to have pathways for talented young people. But you know what? J.D. Vance is younger, but he's no breath of fresh air. So shall we put it this way? Having more diversity of age is something we should have, and it's a qualification when we have an overpredominance of older leaders, but it can't be the only qualification any more than we'd ever say that someone should get a job only because they're Black or only because they're Latino, though we know darn well over most of American history, people got jobs just because they were white or Irish or Italian or WASP, or you name it, right? That happened, and we haven't rebalanced things, not even close. But with Schumer, the question is who would be the alternative? Quite frankly, the most qualified alternative might be someone older than Schumer. That would be Bernie Sanders. I don't necessarily need a younger, less competent version of Chuck Schumer, because we're going to need to use all of the Senate rules to try to limit the damage of the Trump era. So I don't know. Maybe there is a more effective senator who'd be a more effective leader of the Democratic senators, but I don't know that. And this needs to be, in this case, the most capable person, because there's high stakes here. They can undermine Medicare, gut Medicaid, which is Badger here in Wisconsin, make the Affordable Care Act entirely unaffordable. I'm just starting there with what they can do with our environmental regulations, with our education system, et cetera. It's very important that the one leverage point that Democrats have, other than the close margin in the House, is Senate rules. Senate rules make it hard to take drastic action quickly.
Dr. Craig, you really thought this one through, because I'm not saying you don't always, but because after the Joe Biden situation, with people looking at him and saying, hey, Democrats, what are you doing? It's time to move on from these octogenarians and people, but people aren't all the same, and the ravages of aging is different for different people. You don't see those signs with Chuck Schumer or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren that you saw with Joe Biden. And this is why I brought it up, because
Tom Brady was a better quarterback at 45 than most 25-year-olds, but that's unusual. So you want to have Tom Brady as your quarterback at 45, but probably not most other 45-year-olds.
Yeah, and so here's where we're there. And what you are saying is experience does have its place. And we're in a critical juncture of this nation where there's an inherent danger with the man that's in place and his policies and what he wants to do to this government and stability, I guess I'm not putting words in your mouth,
Oh, yeah.
it needs to be taken into account.
At this point, we want a little gridlock and inertia, but not because we're trying to make democracy not work, but because we're trying to prevent it from being damaged permanently. You've seen the cabinet appointments. I'm sorry.
Oh, man,
I look forward to CJ's talking points about why this is the most qualified crew that anyone's ever conceived, but it's absurd for any fair-minded person. And so I do like what the House Democrats have done. Nancy Pelosi is not the leader, but she's still there. Hakeem Jeffries can consult her wisdom as he wants, or he cannot.
and he's
right?
not threatened, and he doesn't feel threatened.
Right. And so that is, I mean, ideally, like when I get old enough to retire, it would be good if the new director of our organization had access to me in some form, right? Just for what I can, but without me controlling it, right? There's some things that probably should be changed. I think we were burned because I think we gave Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt that he wouldn't run if he wasn't up to it. And clearly people were misled. And I don't know what made them think, the Biden family, his aides, Biden himself, that he could hide this and get through a whole election. And as I said in the show repeatedly, we actually do not know that Biden was cognitively impaired. What we do know is he was impaired from a communication standpoint. And that is a vital qualification for the office of President of the United States. It's a rhetorical office. That what the president says and the ability to be persuasive saying it is one of the major things that makes a president powerful and influential in our system and in frankly international politics as well. And he had lost that capacity. He might still have all his marbles. That's not the point. We don't need to jump to that conclusion or to say that he was no longer qualified to be president.
You know, Dr. Craig, all of that was very well said. And, you know, as a guy who's sitting here at 70 years old doing radio, I'm sure there are people who are saying, hey, that guy's too old. It's time to bring somebody else younger to the plate, you know. And I don't quite feel like it's my time yet. I think I still got something left in the tank. But anyway, we're going to talk about Dr. Craig. You know, I've got a segment called the Politrickster of the Day. So we're going to talk about that and more. Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, is on the docket on the Earl Ingram Show.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost nipping at your nose, Yuletide carols being sung by choir, and folks dressed up like Eskimos. Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe.
All right, and welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. It's Wednesday at 9 o'clock. That means the one and only Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. I'll come to the phone lines in a second. Dr. Craig, so many different things that we've got to be cognizant of in this second Donald Trump term, but one of them we know is public education. And so as they talk about doing away with the Department of Education, I was going through this, Dr. Craig, the 20 top private schools with the wealthiest parents in this nation received $130 million in government funding last year. Let me repeat that. The 20 wealthiest private schools with the wealthiest parents received $130 million in government funding last year. Now, Dr. Craig, and I will ask you, who's to blame? Do you think the average person who voted for Donald Trump and who supports, voucher schools have any idea that the wealthiest amongst us are getting taxpayer dollars to pay for tuition for their children, Dr. Craig, at the expense of the public school system, which has been the bedrock of our nation?
But you'll also notice that no one ran on that. So what does it say about how conflicted Democrats can be? They don't want to fund the rich parents getting those benefits either, right? And you can really question if you want to go beyond primary and secondary school to universities, the number of elite colleges and universities, how much of their money is federal financial aid money? And you've got to wonder a little about that too. And then they claim no federal oversight, right?
Right.
And let alone, let's take a Harvard, all the research money they get for all of the research that goes on there, this various scientific and frankly technological development research. Happens not only at public schools like UW-Madison, but happens at big private schools. It's a problem when if no one runs on something, no one's going to hear about it, right? And so a lot of issues that would be big for voters aren't because they're not mentioned. There's kind of a silent conspiracy. But the second thing is when government is too complex for people to understand what it does, how can they be good voters and hold it accountable, even if they were going to take the time? And that's the problem with things like the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, which has required tremendous work for groups to even figure out how it works. I have to tell you, and the level of technical expertise we've needed within Citizen Action to understand it is such that I'm telling you, there's no hope for a voter to understand it.
Right.
Even a very well-intended voter. That is a threat to democracy as much as the attack on voting. But look at it this way, as far as the federal funding that's at risk, do you know, Earl, what percentage of MPSs is Milwaukee Public Schools, the biggest school district in the state and the one that's by far the most diverse in the state? What percentage of the money is federal money?
No, I don't.
19%.
Only 19%?
Well, actually, the federal government does not pay for most of education, primary and secondary education, but they do pay more to impoverished school districts.
Okay.
And so Milwaukee gets more. Yeah, it's even less for wealthier districts. That's why you don't want to overstate the impact. And by the way, getting rid of the Department of Education doesn't mean getting rid of all the programs before the Department of Education. It was all part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So in other words, they wouldn't necessarily get rid of all the funding. But with the new World Wrestling Federation lady in charge of Department of Education,
Linda McMahon.
and the state already shortchanging MPS, and other urban and rural districts are the ones most shortchanged by the state of Wisconsin, withholding the money. They want to just give it away to wealthy people and more tax cuts. That's Robin Voss's agenda. He's announced that for the next session is more regressive tax cuts. He doesn't say regressive. He lies and says they're for the middle class. So it's could do much further damage to MPS because MPS is already. Do you know that MPS has, from what they can count, $500 million in deferred maintenance on its buildings?
Absolutely.
That they can't afford to maintain their own buildings. And it's deferred maintenance. And by the way, their capacity is so limited, they're probably not counting all the deferred maintenance. If you get deeper, you'd probably find a whole lot of other things that these are things they've documented are wrong and need to get fixed in schools they don't have the money to fix.
Well, it's not like they've built any new buildings that I can recall, Dr. Craig, in the last 20 years.
Which is an outrage.
And most of them are 100 years old. The buildings.
Like Bayview High School in my neighborhood.
Washington High School, where I went, and many of these schools clearly have outlived their usefulness. And
my oldest nephew went to Rufus King. That's
building. It hasn't been upgraded in probably 120 years. But
which is an outrage, because do you know that we have the same level of, we have more segregation now of education as far as black and white kids going to school together than we had in the late 1960s. That Brown versus Board has been reversed. And furthermore, the idea of equality, when you have brand new gleaming schools for middle class, predominantly white kids to go to in suburbs, and you have poor, more predominantly black and brown kids going to ancient buildings that they don't have the money to even maintain, that's not equal education or opportunity. Then we say it's a fair playing field, like it is.
Dr. Craig, you pointed out something that I hadn't even thought about. I'm a product of that time in the 1960s. And you are right. It is even more segregated now, almost, than it was then. I'm joined by Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. And Dr. Craig, we're going to go to the phone lines. And I've got one other subject that we want to talk about on the other side. You're tuned into the Earl Ingram Show. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. 855-752-4842 is Wednesday. That means Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Jim from Eden. Good morning to you, Jim. You say what?
Yes. Good morning, Earl. Yeah, thank you for the discussion this morning. Just want to share a reason for distrust of government agencies, three-letter agencies like the CDC. Did you know on December 2nd, just a couple of days ago, 4 years after the COVID pandemic was going on in America, the U.S. House now just released a damning detailed investigative report that reveals the independent media was right all along. And they list this is you can find a PDF.
Right about what?
Oversight.
Right about what?
They were right about that the COVID was engineered in a lab. That's the first one. The second one is the government covered up the truth and pushed disinformation propaganda on purpose. Those are a few of the couple points, but that makes us skeptical of three-letter agencies, government agencies. And so that just recently, you can find that there. The chairman of it was Congressman Brad Wenstrup of Ohio.
One thing I'll say about you, Jim, is you are a nice guy, man. You really are not a person who has an axe to grind. You really are an honest guy, and you call with good intentions, but man, Dr. Craig, you want to respond to what he just said?
Well, I want to be fair in that I've not yet read the report. I've seen some of the press releases. It certainly looks like it's a Republican report, and there are various headlines about the Democrats blasting it as fueling a political agenda. I had not heard any convincing scientific evidence that we had shown that it was produced in a lab. Now, by the way, if it was produced in a lab, it doesn't necessarily mean that therefore all the crazy things said during the COVID pandemic were in any way true, or that the things that came out of then President Trump's mouth and future President Trump's mouth were true. Or that it was deliberate, right? Okay, let's say it really is true. We can establish it came out of a lab. The evidence is mixed on that. We actually don't know. There's evidence the other way. It doesn't mean that was deliberately done by China. If you could then show it was deliberately released and done by China, then okay, then we have a major foreign policy situation. It doesn't mean people shouldn't protect themselves and take public health measures to protect themselves from COVID. So there was one tell here, and the way the caller started, he said another reason to have distrust in government. First of all, the government is not some separate alien body. Okay, the government is our representative democracy. It is neither naturally good or bad. It is what we make it, whether we have a healthy democratic culture that produces an effective, responsive government, or we don't, and we create something else. Okay, so we got to get around this right-wing conservative and a lot of moderate language that makes the government anything other than the instrument of the people and what we make it. And when we aren't good citizens as a group, right, when we aren't engaged, when we don't take control of our own political system, then government can be bad, but is not naturally bad any more than the Milwaukee City Council is naturally good or bad. It can be a bad city council or a good city council based on who's on it and what kind of work they do and how active their constituents are, hold them accountable. So it's a weird kind of political debate, right, to say that now the government is to be discredited. So what? We should ignore public health warnings and that will lead to better outcomes? Do you believe in science? Do you believe that there is a way that we have learned something over the millennium and how to handle communicable diseases and make people safer? The other thing is, yes, there were undoubtedly things done during COVID-19 that were not the right things because we didn't know yet. It was a new thing. It's the novel coronavirus, okay? What their obligation was is not to look 20 years in advance and know what you would have done with the hindsight of 20 years. You have to act on the best evidence we have now. And that's what Dr. Fauci was saying. And it looks like from the headlines, this is yet another attempt to discredit one of the great public servants of our generation. Anthony Fauci gave his life to making us safer, did a great deal to make the AIDS epidemic stop taking the toll it had been taken under Reagan, and for a long time, killing far too many people that needed to kill, and did his level best to help us weather this pandemic. And I'm sure learned new things, but acted based on the evidence he had in front of him and made advice. He had no power to do anything. He had the power to give his advice.
You know, Dr. Craig, he also simplified things. He talked about, I'm talking about Jim, who just said these alphabet entities, as if the EPA and the Food and Drug Administration and all of these things should be thrown out, not having any concept at all about the impact that they have on our lives on a daily basis, Dr. Craig. He's bought into that and totally dismissed the impact that these entities have on the regulations that are on them, that Democrats attempt to make sure that they follow what's in the best interest of the American people. It is Republicans, some of them, who want to do away with the regulations of those entities. So,
at the behest of the wealthiest, most powerful people in our country, who want to profit by poisoning us. So here's the thing. Environmental Protection Agency, nice name, right? Food and Drug Administration, right. Nice name. I'm the last one to tell you they're necessarily always doing the right thing. In fact, I think they're often co-opted by industry and do their bidding too much. Do we need an Environmental Protection Agency, given all the environmental threats and the continuing death? Yes. If there's a problem with this EPA, we need to fix it. What is its goal? To protect public health and to make us safe, not to allow someone to make profits. And so if we have a problem with the EPA, we shouldn't dismiss it as an alphabet agency. We need to fix it, and we need to be clear on how it needs to be fixed, and we need to vote for people who will do so, will run on doing so, and we can hold accountable as to whether they actually achieve it or not.
There's a reason why those entities came into effect, because of the damage that was being done before they even got there. Let's go to CJ. Good morning to you, CJ. You say what?
Good morning, Dr. Craig and Earl. Thanks for taking my call. These entities that you speak so highly of have failed us, and they've been politicized. And we walked Dr. Fauci, our most expensive entity or leader of one of these institutions, lie to us right to our face. We now know that his...
Where did he lie? What did he lie about?
Funding,
what did he lie about?
Was not funding from our health institution going to Wuhan lab? Yes, we now know that. We now know that. And Fauci lied to us, and the FBI lied to us, spied on our president. If you read the John Durham report, we now know who our most trusted institutions have been politicized and attacked.
So Donald Trump is not politicizing any of those entities?
More have died under Biden than Trump.
More what? You mean because of COVID? All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Craig, you want to respond to any of that? That nonsense?
I still, okay, TJ's lost confidence in these agencies. Didn't hear an answer to, do we need an environmental protection agency? And don't we need qualified people to run it? Do we need a set of facts we can agree on that are actual facts, right? Does it help us to have RFK Jr.'s vaccine denial stuff as part of our evaluation of whether the FDA or the other health agencies, the NIH, are doing a good job or not? No, it makes it impossible to hold them accountable. And this is the problem with conservatism and corporate propaganda. There's no basis of facts anymore. There is a basis of facts, but it's been lost more political dialogue because half of our electorate believes in the facts they want to believe in, that they're lied about to, mostly on digital and social media and on cable like Fox News.
Tom from LA. Good morning to you, Tom. You say what?
Good morning. First, we, the people, are the government. Second, I am a proud FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Democrat. Part of the problem is, and this is on the Democratic side, is when they bring out policy, they nibble around the edges. They don't say a simple message like, we're going to have Medicare for all for children under 12 years old. That's a very simple message. Even when Kamala came out with her $500 and $25,000 and $50,000, nobody can understand the simple message. And the truth is, the regressive people like CJ and like these people are lazy. They don't understand the intricacies of government. They just want it to be a one-answer bumper sticker on there. And Democrats have got to get into the game and start doing a one-answer bumper sticker type of answer in terms of saying Medicare for all or Medicare for kids under 12 years old or whatever. Not this, you do this, and then you do this, and then you put a tax credit there, and you do that there. Democrats compromise before they even get to the table.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the call. Dr. Craig, you want to respond?
Tom's right. And I would just say, as someone who has a PhD in communications, I don't think it's all messaging incompetence. I'm not saying Tom said that. I'm just, a lot of the debate right now is about messaging. I think it's refusal to take the strong stand, to try to take the more careful stand that's deniable because you're conflicted, because the Democrats spent massive amounts of money this cycle. This is the elephant in the room that you will not hear on Morning Joe, right? They outspent the Republicans. Well, some of that money came grassroots, but a lot more of it came from big interests that they don't want to offend. And, Bernie Sanders has said for years, you can't take all of Wall Street's money and represent average working people. It won't happen. It won't work. And that's what we're seeing over and over again. So I think if there's an existential choice the Democrats have, it is, if you want working folks to vote for you, you actually have to represent them, which means you have to offend some of those moneyed interests. And you need to run campaigns like Bernie Sanders did in 16 and 20 that can raise so much small donor money that you don't need to take that other money.
Dr. Craig, it's still pretty amazing to me. After this election, the election is over. There are people who are still parroting the same thing that the commercials were being run by Republicans.
Yep.
It's still with them.
I guess they're good messaging. Good messaging, Earl, from the standpoint of effectiveness, not ethics.
That has to be it, Dr. Craig, because those things that were questionable even during the time that they were running them, here we've got people who are still parroting those things when they don't matter anymore. They don't have to say those things anymore. They're in. 855-752-4842. Again, the politrickster of the day on the Earl Ingram Show. All right, welcome back to what I can't believe is the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. The one and only Dr. Robert Craig is holding fort. So, Dr. Craig, before we go back to the phone lines, I do a politrickster of the day each day now. And so today's politrickster of the day is Congressman Rich McCormick. And he represents the wealthiest congressional district in the state of Georgia. And what he is calling for is cuts to Social Security, Dr. Craig, and he's calling for cuts to other social programs because we can't afford it. Now, Dr. Craig, I don't pretend to have the knowledge that you have on our government and how things work. But you can't call for cuts to those programs at the same time you keep asking for cuts for the taxes on the wealthiest people amongst us. How do you reconcile that, Dr. Craig, where it makes sense?
Oh, well, it's irreconcilable. They've been cutting the tax burden of the wealthiest people, and large corporations in this country has declined precipitously over time since the 1970s as they've gotten a much bigger share of all of our economic gains. That's what's put the big squeeze on the working class and the middle class and low income folks. And there's plenty of money there. There's plenty of money. You do not need to renew or make worse the Trump tax cuts. So I love the way they say there isn't the money. They find the money for what they want to do. They found the money for the Iraq War when we decided that was politically convenient to blame Saddam Hussein for a vicious attack, 9/11, that he had nothing to do with.
Right.
We know he had nothing to do with, and it was clear then. So this is a matter of what you believe. By the way, the United States is a currency issuer. What that means is that we actually don't have a limit on how much we can spend. There are natural limits and come. Remember when we did bread and butter in the 60s, it can be inflationary if you do too much, but we have much more control than other countries. Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, they do not have the power we do because dollar is the default currency of the global economy. We have been borrowing from Social Security since the 60s on paper. We simply need to meet this commitment. Now, this is the kind of thing that if you do it, you're actually investing in economic activity that grows the economy, et cetera. Social Security, Medicare, these are examples of good investments. Bad investments is giveaways to give Elon Musk another couple $1 billion in tax breaks he doesn't need so he can do God knows what with it. I think we learned more about him in this election cycle, more than we wanted to know. And so, yeah, I'm sitting here in Georgia. The wealthy parts of Georgia are quite wealthy. I don't know what looking around his district, what Representative McCormick thinks, why he thinks that we can't afford, we're the only advanced industrial economy in the world that can't afford a decent retirement system. Ours is the worst of the group as far as how we treat our seniors, and we apparently can't have that either. Will Representative McCormick, what he want to do with starving seniors on the streets? Because, there's a high percentage of seniors, upwards, I don't want to reinstate the number, but it's a third or more, that their only source of income is their Social Security check. What are you going to do with those folks?
Well, that's why he's the politrickster of the day. Let's go to Cassandra from Middleton. Good morning to you, Cassandra. You say what?
Hi, Earl and Robert. Thanks for taking my call. I know there's just some short time left. Robert, I just want to ask you to think about something, especially your views on the leadership. Nancy Pelosi needs not only to retire, but she needs to leave the seat in Congress. And because what company can effectively lead, what new leader can effectively lead when the old leadership is still actively involved and can possibly override the new leader's decision? During the whole Biden debacle of whether he should remain the candidate or drop out of the the presidential race, members of Congress, they were contacting Pelosi. She wasn't the leader. They should have been contacting Hakeem Jeffries. And so Pelosi, she had her chance. I think she needs to drop out. Pelosi, Hoyer, Clyburn, all of those guys. And I think
Cassandra,
they're
I wish we
old.
had more time. We have it. Thank you very much for the call, Dr. Craig.
I don't want to die on the sword. I'm not saying that the be all and end all is keeping Nancy Pelosi around. By the way, she could be, you ever at a kitchen cabinet, she could be the most influential advisor and not be in Congress. So you're not really going to tell Hakeem Jeffries or anyone else who they can rely on for advice, I don't think. I can tell you that for our, because we have two different boards of directors within Citizen Action for two different related organizations. And we have younger people are on, but I keep a.
Well, we lost Dr. Craig.
Extremely
Anyway,
helpful. I don't want to say it's time for them to move on. I want both. Yeah.
Who joined in. Really appreciate it. Sorry we ran out of time. I'll be back on tomorrow. We'll continue the conversation with Dr. Omar, the pharmacist. You'll be in the pharmacy with Dr. Omar. Dr. Craig, we'll see you soon. Always great to have you on. Up next, Jane Madner and Greg Bott, Madner on air. Hey, enjoy the day. I'll see you guys on tomorrow.